Hello and welcome to another episode of What the Haze. Today we're going to look at AI and writing, which is a particular hot topic right now. Good books versus bad books. What you know versus what you don't. And a little bit from the world of the weird and wonderful. Okay, so welcome everybody. What I'm going to start to do now is, at the start of my podcast, instead of just diving straight into the writing content, I'm just going to give my thanks to the people out there that are listening and downloading my podcast. And I'm going to do that, as well as saying thank you, by mentioning one of the home cities that I can see on my Buzzsprout page. So obviously I can't mention names because I don't know them, but I can mention the city. And so if you're listening to this episode, you know who you are. I think that's pretty cool, but I just want to say that I do get a particular thrill out of looking at, who's listening to my podcasts from all around the world. I think it's just fantastic. It's magic. So the first city I'm going to mention, and this will be a regular feature, so next week and the week after, we'll have different cities. The first week is Glasgow. Okay, so if you're from Glasgow, thank you very much. I really hope you learned something. If you have any questions, please don't fail to drop me a line, start a discussion point, anything like that. But thank you very much. Okay, let's get right into it. AI and writing. Originally, I wasn't going to do this week, but I got into like a mini argument on Threads the other day, and I'd been listening to some podcasts on AI and writing, and I realized, no. I've got a lot to say on it, and other people have got a lot to say, and it's definitely one of those hot topics in the writing community right now. I mean, you could say, broadly speaking, you've got two schools of thought. You've got those people that are massively in favor of AI in their writing, and you've got those people that are massively against. Now, what does that mean? How would I define that? So massively in favor would be something like this. You write a story and it's 80,000 words and you want it to be 40,000 words. You would upload your story to ChatGPT or another program and ask it, condense it please to 40,000, and it will, and you might edit it and you'll accept it. That idea was advanced by a guy called Michael Dean. I'm not going to criticize him too much, just to say that's his idea. I personally think, I said I wasn't going to criticize, now I'm going to criticize. That's a slippery slope. And very soon, I think it's easier to start, saying to AI, right, okay, I've got this character called blah, blah, blah. This is my plot idea. Now you write the book. It sounds outrageous, doesn't it? I bet people are already doing it. And there's another thing. I've heard the authors were doing this before AI, where they had a ghost writing team, and they say, right, this is the idea. You go away and write it. Give it back to me. I make some finishing touches. Boom, published. All the fame and money are mine. I really don't like that. That's fake. I'm not going to call it any writers because I don't know, obviously, categorically if it's true about those particular writers doing it. And it definitely is true. People do it. It's happened for a long time in the art community where, you might have a famous artist, but in actual fact, they head up a workshop and it's not that person is making that piece of art, but that's what it says in the art gallery. It's their workshop. They might have worked on it a little bit, or maybe 7% of the time, but I do think that's one of the worst parts of that modern era when it comes to arts, is that there's lots of other input going into books and artwork, and it's not acknowledged. Now, you could argue, well, for writing books, you've got the acknowledgements. Acknowledgements is to say thank you. Thank you to my editor. Thank you to my agent. Thank you to my wife. Thank you to my dog. But the dog didn't write it. But if there's people out there putting into your work, then, you should be acknowledging it. But this is, why does it not happen? Well, it's not sexy, is it? It's not cool to say this new book about this new, detective or spy was written by 5, 6, 7 people. Nobody wants to buy that because, do you know why? We don't trust it. I think we're in favor of like praising the one. We always want one author. We want one actor. We want one director. We want one editor. We want one artist, even when it's manifestly not true. I think it's something when it comes to yourselves and you're doing your own reading or going to art galleries to become more aware of, and you don't have to necessarily call it out. I mean, look, if I was sat in the same room as a writer and they were using a ghostwriting team, I'd call them out in a second. And no doubt they would not appreciate it at all. But like an art gallery, I'm not an artist. I just pocket it, for want of a better word. I just put it in my back pocket and go, now I know it's not all them. So maybe next time I mention great artists, I don't mention that person's name. I'll probably find out now that Michelangelo was not just the only guy working on it. Oh, he had a whole team and he completely scammed them. We'll see. So the other side of this AI writing debate are what I would call the purists. And I think you can probably guess what they stand for. No AI in art. No AI in art, no AI in writing, in any part of the process. My point on Threads I was not making the argument that we should use AI even to check our work. I was tempted last week, I'll be honest. I'd done a blog post and I was really tempted to just chuck it through AI and just say, just give me a bit of feedback. And in the end, I was like, no, it's a slippery slope. I'm not quite sure what the AI would have to say. Maybe a lot. Maybe it would have really criticized it. I don't know. But I just thought, I think if I'm going to send it to a person, I'm not going to bother, to be honest. For a blog post, it's not really worth it, to be honest. I'll send it to a person. But my point was, when you've written a novel and you've edited it and then you're sending it to agents, you've got to write things like synopses. You've got to write things like query letters, brief biographies, book blurbs, and even then briefer summaries. There's about 4 or 5 different things you have to do. I'll hold my hand up. I'm not good at writing that kind of writing. I mean, I'm not terrible, but I'm several shades below professional. And I have to think about when the agents get books in from other writers that are good enough to get to the last round, and I believe my writing is good enough to get to the last round in most cases. At the end of the day, they still might just look at the synopsis. And if mine is just a few shades short of professional, that might be it. They're judging me on that. And so what I do now is, I did it with my last book, or should I say my last book submission, I wrote down what I wanted to say about the book, sent it to, I think it was ChatGPT or another, it was a Chinese AI, and said, make this more professional or something like that. And it did. But don't get me wrong, I also edited it, but the ideas were mine. There's people out there who completely disagree, slippery slope. I do get it. I'm not saying your points are without merit. But my line is the fluff, the stuff that I'm not good at, or not very good at, not excellent at. I will use AI in a second, in an absolute second. And I listened about the book. It's a good book that's not eminently publishable. It was about a gay werewolf, which sounds ridiculous, and maybe it's because it was ridiculous. But it was the idea I had in my head at the time. That was the idea I had. That was the idea I was going to run with. And so I had to write it. And I did all the AI stuff for the, for the marketing and stuff and like the book blurbs. And I just got I got a lot more feedback from agents. Like I got like before in the summer, like 3 or 4 personal replies, saying things like, we like your writing, blah, 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 but you're not right for my list. Close enough to know that I was close enough. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do that again. And you know what? Let the other guys out there not use it and and maybe not get the publishing deal, because at the end of the day, you've still got to make the right decisions when it comes to these things. It's so close. It's really, there's a huge line between getting published and getting not. And the vast majority of writers are in the not column for all their lives. And I've got to the age now of almost 48 where I've just got to go for it. I'm not that I haven't gone for it before. I think I've just got to go for it. I got to think creatively, and I've got to branch out with my ideas and improve aspects of being a marketing expert or whatever you want to call it, so that I can get published, so that I can get an agent, so that I can get my ideas spread around the world. And there's another thing, I do want to influence people. I don't mean like influencer. I mean like I'd love to go to schools and just read my books and talk to them about writing, about creativity. This is, I'm from the UK. Yeah, I'd love to go to the UK schools, but I'd love to go to America, Canada, all around the world, Africa, anywhere. There's nothing wrong, with boosting literacy and getting kids into reading. I heard on a podcast the other day saying that, we read less. I don't know if that's because of modern technology per se and like things like social media, but I think as well, like, in my lifetime, the big publishing phenomenons were, books like the Harry Potter series, Game of Thrones, which is essentially finished. I mean, look, don't get me wrong. Allegedly, George Martin's still working on it, but until that next book comes out, it's a dead series. Why do I say this? The TV show is finished. The last book was published, oh my Lord, 13 years ago? So, that bubble, it's probably still there to a certain extent, but it's definitely going down. Books like Twilight, Hunger Games have faded. So I think right now, the world needs maybe 1 or 2 new series. And I think it probably needs 1 or 2 or 3 new authors to come out of the standard of, say, J.K. Rowling, Stephen King, George Martin. It doesn't quite have that right now, I don't think. And I think if you can just go around schools and just encourage people, maybe do some writing workshops, you never know. You might find the next J.K. Rowling, you might find the next Stephen King, you might find the next George Martin. Because for me, those are the 3 big, huge writers of our time. And I say that because Stephen King's writing in the late 70s initially. He's still massively read today. One of my students, this is in China, in Chengdu in China, talking about, watching the movie and reading the book, It. What is that? 30, 40 years after it was published. It's already jumped a generation or 2. J.K. Rowling, everybody reads Harry Potter in China. Just want to say that. At the end of the day, right now she's a controversial character, rightly or wrongly, but we cannot deny this and we can't say it enough. She is immensely popular. Her books are immensely popular, and they've already passed to the next generation, and they'll continue to do so in a way that, I'm sorry, Twilight and Hunger Games haven't. Now, I can't speak. Obviously, I'm living in China, and I just kind of want to base it on that if you're an American author or a UK author, or from Australia, or from India, anywhere, if you can really make it, you're getting published in the English language in China. And if the kids here, and I teach at, a pretty good, very good K-12 school in Chengdu, and if the kids are talking about you, if they're reading your books, boom, you've made it. I mean, to be fair, maybe I'm being a bit unfair about the Hunger Games. You know, when it comes up, sometimes people are aware of it. They just maybe haven't read it. Twilight has definitely died. I mean, that's just, you say Twilight and they look at you like, the time of the day? I go, no, about vampires. And they still look at you like, you're like, what? What? Vampires? What? So, I mean, that's an interesting phenomenon. I think that's what like William Blake, or the phenomenon of William Blake, tells me about publishing. And of course, William Blake wasn't really successful in his lifetime, but within a generation, by the time he would click forward to the Victorian age, he becomes immensely popular. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what it's about. It's about, yes, it's about being successful and popular, but then you kick on to the next generation. And sometimes you don't know why. William Blake, anti-monarchist, anti-establishment, is adopted by a society that's pro-monarchy, pro-establishment. So you don't know. You don't know how and why some writers bridge the generational gap, and why some do not. It's just random. I'm sure that, don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's PhDs out there, and I'm sure there's theses about it that I haven't read, that do explain it, but it's still, I still find it quite perplexing. So back to AI and writing, I think to bridge those two divides, both schools are wrong. I'll say why. The purist school is completely wrong, because they're trying to advance the idea that AI is cheating. Just say, if you're a published author, there might be some published authors out there listening to this, and you're publishing your book, and it goes to the printer, and you pick it up, and you see the blurb on the back. You didn't write that. Someone else wrote that. Did you design the artwork? 99.9999% chance of the time, no chance. No chance in a million years you'd do it. So I don't know why some people, get on their soapbox about getting AI to write a book blurb or a synopsis, when in the publishing world, writers don't write those anyway. I understand you shouldn't, get AI to write something and then not check it. AI will make great editors, or should make great editors of us all. Sure. And you can even do a few and choose the best. But the idea that, those writers that don't use AI, or their writing is pure, it's absolute rubbish. Absolute rubbish. I mean, you use, things like Word docs and stuff. That does spell checks and grammar checks and word checks. Those are adding into it. If you use beta readers, I have done in the past, it's the same thing. They're giving you feedback that you might change on. They're having an impact. What's the difference? What is the difference? But maybe I should try it. Maybe I should go down that slippery slope. What is the difference between using a beta reader as a person or a beta reader as an AI? I think it depends on the person a lot of the time. If you've got someone that really looks at it, I think that they're going to be very good for you. But if you've just got someone that's just going to do an editing check, but then this is also the problem. I think writing is a lot about, one of my students said to me the other day about, I can't write because my grammar's not good enough. I said, no. Writers don't pay attention to grammar. Sorry, maybe I said it a bit better than that. What I meant was, for writers, you've got to be good, but you don't let grammar dictate to you. You dictate to grammar. When you get that good at language and you get that good at paragraphing and grammar, that's the ideal. You don't go around having one word sentences, for example, but you do need them at times in a book. And that's what you have to do. So I think going back to this point of AI and not AI, it's just finding that balance. And whatever you do, don't get it so that AI is writing your book, your language. I think that's important here. It's the language that's important. And you're just doing a checklist. That should never happen. And we've got to guard against that. I do wonder if there should be some kind of, publishing law where completely AI books are banned completely. But I think the same for about, writing teams. I think if a writing team is involved in it, it should be printed on the front. Maybe that's the same for AI as well. I do think in this case there does need to be some kind of legislation to protect writers, but also readers as well. Actually, I think there's something else to say on them. Anything else to say on the matter? I think that really covers it. Really, it's just you'll find that when I'm doing my podcast, a lot of the things I talk about at the end of the day, it's just about finding balance. And as a writer, a balanced judgment. Just have a judgment. Just see just because you decide one thing today doesn't mean you can't change it next book. Like I've used beta readers in the past. I've also not used them. This time I'll definitely use them. Because I think it will just help me with the publishing process. See, a tongue twister. Right, I'm going to move on now to good books versus bad books. Some of the writers out there, you might have heard of this concept. Stephen King advanced this idea to a certain extent, not completely, in his book, I think, On Writing, where he said that the best way to learn is by reading bad books. And a few other people have echoed that idea. I don't agree. Bad writing, reading bad writing, as in reading a bad book, is one of the worst things you can do. Not necessarily as a writer, but as a reader, it's an awful experience. It's like going to the dentist, like I did in the summer. And have you ever had your teeth cleaned? Oh my God, it's agony. For me, that's what reading bad literature. And I don't mean bad literature like, oh, this paragraph could be better written, or this sentence could be better written. I mean, just bad. I don't mean 3 out of 5. I'm talking 1 out of 5 stuff. Where you had spelling mistakes, grammar mistakes, characters that do silly things and don't make sense. Those kind of books I don't like, and I don't advise writers to read them. Why? Because, at least in my experience, I read less. I develop an excuse to not read the book. I put it down. If I've read 10 pages and I really don't like it, I won't. I'll stop reading. I mean, I'll be honest, maybe some of the best books of all time I've stopped reading. Catch-22, couldn't finish it. I just didn't like the tone of the book. That's one that stands out. Another one is Robert Heinlein, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. I couldn't read it. It was unreadable. He tried to create, if I remember, his own language and style of writing. I think, didn't he believe, I'm sure I heard somewhere, and I could be wrong, that he didn't believe in editing. It shows. And a lot of the dialogue it's like moon pronunciation, like moon dialect. I was just like, yeah, I get it. But to quote Dragon's Den, I'm out. No, I can't understand you. I don't want to have to be asked to make so many leaps when I'm reading. And that's different from a really good book. See, we're going into the good books argument. A really good book makes you think as well. And that doesn't mean, oh, I agree with them and this is why. Sometimes you might disagree with them, or think you disagree with them, and you step back a bit and you think about it and you go, why do I disagree with them? Oh, because of this. And those are fantastic books, by the way. To be fair, sometimes there can be non-fiction books, but at the moment I'm reading a book by Charles Dickens, David Copperfield, and I've not read Dickens for a while. I kind of fell out of love with him for a while, and I'll be honest, I think I'm falling back in love with his writing. I see Dickens right now as like the source for the modern novel. When I say the modern novel, I don't mean anything that's remotely arty or fancy. I mean, he's the template most writers, including myself, follow. You've got a story that's going towards its conclusion. There might be things like twists and stuff, but that's not the point I'm making. He has an agenda. He's telling you something about the society. He's critiquing society. He's careful not to just make it a story about poor boy gets rich, falls in love, blah, blah, blah. That book's been told throughout the annals of time. But he's also taking care to tell the reader there's a message. Society's not perfect and it must be fixed. And then you get the dialogue that's funny, the characters that are so well rounded. You can see Harry Potter comes out of Charles Dickens. J.K. Rowling can't write Harry Potter without, the Dickens books. It's not in a million years. And the way he described his characters, I just think it's, yes, of course, now there's a little bit more flowery language. It was written in the Victorian times, but the basics are there for the modern 20th and 21st century novel. And I think that's fantastic. And this is what I'm getting at now with good books. Good books, we talk about page turners. No, good books aren't page turners. Good books are comebackers. Good books are the ones where you've put them down because everybody we live busy lives, and we've got this to do and that to do. We've got to go to work, got to feed the baby, etc., etc. Really great books, really good books. We go back to them. They call to us from the coffee table, from the book stand, from the wardrobe, wherever you put the book. You're at work. You're going for your run, you're walking your dog, and you're thinking, what is David Copperfield getting up to? What is going to happen to him at that school? I hope the main villain in David Copperfield, please let him get his comeuppance. These are the great books, not page turners. It's the ones that you go back to. And again, going back to writing, really good books. Like I'm reading this and I'm like, you know what? I can see maybe my genesis as a writer in Dickens. And because of that, I think I need to revisit him and think about my own writing and maybe what I'm trying to achieve with some of the dialogue, some of the punctuation, maybe some of the characters, some of the descriptions. And maybe I'm not doing it enough and maybe I can learn from that. And that's what I'm getting at the moment, from David Copperfield. And the more you read, the better you get at writing. It's that simple. I mean, bad books, the less you read, the worse you get at writing. It's that simple. And as I said before about, I always aim for a balance. If there's one balance I'd say, and I've been listening to a lot of podcasts recently about writing, and I find it, so fantastic. And there's one guy I'll shout out to and I'll recommend. If I get his last name wrong, I'm sorry. It's David Perell or David Perell, Perell. He's on YouTube, and I mostly listen to podcasts on YouTube these days. And to be fair, he interviews lots of famous writers. Famous writers I've not heard of. They tend to be quite academic, and there's good things about that, and there's bad things. But I think that he's got me into podcasting and listening to the art of writing. And I've been listening to his podcast all week, and some of the people he has on there, I think he's a really nice guy, David Perell. I think sometimes maybe he's afraid to call them out a bit. Maybe it's the odd question he asks. I think he's like, "Oh, really? You think that?" And he doesn't quite want to push it. He's very respectful, maybe at times a bit too respectful. But yeah, some of the guests on there, they say things like, actually, I don't really read. Actually, I'm too busy writing and promoting my books. I'm too busy trying to get rich. Or, actually, I don't read much these days. There's something to that extent. That's completely wrong. It's not advice, but a novice writer listening to that could be forgiven for believing, oh, well, they're famous. They've made it. They've got published, they've got rich, and they don't read many books. I don't need to read many books. I can be lazy. No, you can't. Every great writer is also a great reader, and I'll go back to Stephen King. Stephen King reads like crazy. in his book on writing, he's got a whole list, most of which is classic literature, but I think he likes James Patterson as well. He reads a lot of Dickens and Thomas Hardy, for example. These are the great, novelists of our time, or past times, I should say. But they're still huge today. Huge today. They'll always last. What I would say about guests and stuff on podcasts is that, or any kind of famous writer, is one thing you have to understand is that until that writer has been adopted by the succeeding generation or generations, it's all transitory. It's all a fugazi. Yeah, they're rich and famous right now. They're being read right now. They're on the New York Times bestseller list right now. And I'm not begrudging them that, not in a million years. But you never know what the new generation will like, what their tastes are like, and what they reject and what they don't like. It's really hard to tell. Really hard to tell. Dickens has obviously lasted. Blake has lasted. Keats, Byron, all these people, Tennyson, from the 20th century, Hemingway and Steinbeck have definitely lasted. But right now, it's hard to say. And so I think we always have to bear that in mind. So at the end of the day, good books versus bad books, read more good books, but do read. And another thing about reading is read whatever you can. Just read whenever you can. If you can read, if it's 20 minutes a day, you read for 20 minutes a day. I've got a really young kid. I'm riding on the bus. I've got a very busy work life. Sometimes my reading day is 20 minutes. Is that enough? No, of course not. But it's better than zero. But then there's other days, because I'm reading 20 minutes, like yesterday, I just get a bit more time and I read for an hour. And it was fantastic. I was fully immersed in the novel. But that's one of the secrets to great writing, reading very good books regularly. Okay, let's go on to the next one now, the third installment, which is what you know versus what you don't. I think this is like one of those topics in the writing community that's probably a bit of a sleeper. Brandon Sanderson, if you've not heard of him, he's a fantasy writer. He was talking about it. I'll say on one of his podcasts last week. I listened to it last week. I think it might have been 6 months ago. And he was saying that, like, a lot of people have heard about what you know. No one's heard about write about what you don't. But yeah, write about what you know is this idea. Oh, you grew up in poverty? Well, write about that, pretty much. Or if you're putting characters into books, maybe you write about yourself, or maybe you knew characters when you were younger that were just like that. And maybe, don't get me wrong, maybe you fictionalize them somewhat. I don't mean changing names. I mean, you might exaggerate certain traits, you know. What you don't would be like, yeah, I'm just going to write a sci-fi book, for example. Maybe about characters I know nothing about. Like, just say, you're like me, white heterosexual male. I'm going to write a sci-fi book. Obviously, I don't know what it's like to be in space because I've not been there. I'm going to write a sci-fi book featuring a gay black teenager. What do I know about gay black teenagers? Nothing. Apart from the fact they exist. Okay? So the conventional wisdom goes like this. Write about what you know. Don't write about what you don't. Now, as you know, I'm all about balance. So I disagree with the last point. I think you always have to write about what you know to a certain extent. Like my first book, Jack Strong and the Red Giant, the main character, Jack Strong, is based upon me. Or me as I was and me as I wanted to become, and of course, after a certain while, the character becomes flesh and blood. The character becomes real. And then as a writer, I have to write him like he's a real character. And I've got to make sure, would Jack Strong do this? Would Jack Strong do that? There's another character in there called Gaz Finch. It was based upon a boy I knew at school, but exaggerated. So again, that's the what you don't know a bit. Maybe I exaggerate that a bit. And then, of course, but then the spaceship bit, the bits and the big bits of alien planets full of exploding volcanoes and cities with skyscrapers covered all around the planet. You know, I don't know what it's like to live in those places, but I lived about them nonetheless. I mean, look, I live in a mega city at the moment called Chengdu. So that, and I've lived, when I was writing Jack Strong and the Red Giant, I lived in Beijing. And yes, that experience influenced my writing to some degree, but still, I still wrote about my imagination. I still, just thought, just create some things, and so this is the thing. You've got to get the balance right. Just writing about what you know is boring. So, what my life is, I've lived and taught English in China and Korea. I grew up in the UK, went to university. By the conventional wisdom, I'm only supposed to write about that. Maybe that's why you get a lot. There's quite a big school these days of, writers that might write about childhood experiences and stuff. And I get that. There's some really good stories out there, and I like that style of writing. Amy Tan would be one writer that I've read. I've read a couple of her short stories, where they I think it's almost like a form of therapy, and they're processing it in their minds as they put it down on the page. And I forgot the name of the other guy. He wrote a book called The Paper Tiger, and it's about his relationship with his mom, and it's really good. The one thing I'll say is there'll always be an element of probably fictionalization, so there will be a sliver of what you don't know. But I can see how, they've written about those experiences because it's what they know a lot about, But that doesn't mean we all should follow that. If we all write about our childhood experiences, that's so boring. Tolkien never writes The Lord of the Rings. Tolkien doesn't know what it's like to be a hobbit. He might have experiences with like working class farmers in Staffordshire, and that's where the Shire comes from. We get the influences, but there's a lot of what he doesn't know in the book. And of course, he's obviously inspired by, Anglo-Saxon legends and myths and books, and like Beowulf. And he runs with it. One thing I like to do, I've written quite a few novels now. I've actually lost count. It's 12 or 13. Admittedly, 5 of that are from one series. So you could always argue it's really 7 or 8 standalone novels. And sometimes that's better for me to think about because it tells me I'm not as experienced as I think I am. 12 or 13 is obviously a lot higher number than 7 or 8. 7 or 8 is kind of like, well, I'm still not published. Yeah, it's kind of respectable, 7 or 8. I think Brandon Sanderson was published on his 6th novel. Stephen King was like 4th or 5th. So it's beyond the realms of, respectable at the moment. But the problem is, with these things, the problem is, so I've just lost my my thought track there, is I can get bored. I can get bored. I was getting bored just now. You can keep writing about the same characters over and over again. So I was writing about Jack Strong, and this is young, 13, 14-year-old, bullied kid, lacks confidence, lacks self-esteem. I could write characters like that till kingdom come. No problemo, dude, no problemo. But that's boring. And of course I'm not published, so I've got to always try things new. I'm like an actor. I see writing as like acting. I want to like push myself and write about, that gay black teenager. Wow, what a challenge that would be. And you know what? Maybe I would fail. Maybe then I would do a bit of research. Stephen King always talks about doing research after you finish the book. and then checking to see if these things would happen. I do that to a certain extent as well. I do. You might listen. Don't get me wrong. My research might be just asking Google a question about something. You know, how, like, for example, I wrote in my current book about these kids eating, ramen noodles after the apocalypse, and I was like, wait, how long do ramen noodles stay fresh before they go off? And I thought the answer was going to be like 10 years, but it was like 6 months or a year or something. So I learned that my plot point was false. But what I did do then is I changed that. I put it in a detail in the story that they're like, in the future, preservatives make food last for 100 and 200 years. But that just shows how you can research after you finish a novel. But yeah, going back to the point is, I want to write about characters. I want to write about places that maybe I've not been to before, or maybe I've been to a little bit. So again, like my current novel, Dystopia 2.5, that's not the title, it's the working title. Set in Manhattan. I went there for a day. A lot of things I don't know about Manhattan, I made it up. I set another novel in Michigan. Do I know what it's like to live in Michigan? No. But I've been to Wisconsin, and I've been to Canada, and I've been to Massachusetts. Shout out if you're a writer listening to this and you live in those places. And so I could just make that leap. What does and I wrote about in my last book, about this gay teenager. What do I know about gay teenagers? Well, I've got friends that are gay, and I've had friends in the past that are gay, and you can make leaps. We all consume media. We can make a leap. But it's what I don't know. I don't know it. I haven't lived it. But I find that super interesting. That makes me want to write a book. That's what I find challenging in a good way. And a writer should always challenge themselves. I wrote a book called Bigfoot Girl about African American teenager looking for Bigfoot. And it was based upon someone. I did base it upon someone. But again, I had to make leaps. And that's what editing is for. If you have something that doesn't make sense, you can always say why in the book. So in this book, Bigfoot Girl, the teenager's African American, but her favorite band is The Cure. Now, one thing I'm really kind of wary of in books is where we make white characters black. Neil Gaiman has done it, and I'm not knocking him here. I'm just stating a fact. And what happens is, but they're not culturally black. And I think that's a mistake. So if, as I did, in this book, the girl, she's split between her Irish American father, who's works for the FBI, and her African American mother, who's got severe mental health problems. And so she's looked after by her dad, who goes all around the country on different cases and stuff. And that's what her favorite band is, The Cure, and it's not mentioned. It's supposed to be shown to, and she might not like her dad because she's with him and she wants to be with her mum. Her mum can't look after her. That's why she's into The Cure. That's why she's influenced by what you might call white culture, because of that difference. But if I created her where she has two black parents and she lives in, say, a typically black neighborhood, for example, or I don't think in a million years I would have had her favorite band as The Cure. It's something I'm quite sensitive to. I do think that if we're going to have black characters in Butt, they should be culturally black, unless there's a distinct reason for it. I was thinking about Neil Gaiman's book. What's it called now? I think he does it a bit with American Gods, where the main character is supposed to be black, but he's not culturally black. So it's a bit like, I got this character and I wrote it as a white character, and I go, you know what? I'll call him Shadow. He's black. and it's great. It's great. It's great for the advancement, I think, of for Black people and African American people. But I think at times it doesn't need that. I think at times maybe. But it's, how can you make Shadow in American Gods culturally Black when he's supposed to represent Thor, who was, you know, the white, presumably white Norwegian god, unless maybe Neil Gaiman could have, you know, linked it to, maybe he could have done something showing that actually Thor was actually Black, and that's why. Don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan of Neil Gaiman, and I'm a huge fan of American Gods. The novel I was thinking of that has slipped my mind is Anansi Boys. Anansi Boys is about this African god. What's he called? It's not Tiger, that's the enemy. No, I can't remember. It's Anansi. It's Anansi, the spider god, of course it is. What I'm thinking of. And his two sons are Black. One of them's like one of them's a demigod. Anyway, one's a demigod, one's not. One of them lives in London and lives on ostensibly normal life, but he's Black. But he's not remotely culturally Black. And when I'm reading it, and I've read it twice, it's a really good book, by the way. I do recommend you read it, especially if you've read American Gods. Do go on and read it. But there's nothing about him that I find culturally Black. And I find that I'm like, can you not have just put in a few more details? I always say it's a paragraph. It's a short paragraph. It's 2 sentences. I just thought, other than that, I'm trying to think what else, if it was any, and I thought about this for a while. Am I forgetting things? And I've read the book twice, and again, it's a great book. He dances. I don't know what, he's a singer. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. I don't think that's close enough. I think maybe he could have found time to have, you know, just inserted a few more details. So what you know versus what you don't. I suppose ultimately I'm going to aim now for the balanced ending. It just depends on what you're writing. But I think the what you don't know phase or zone of writing, that's the Goldilocks zone. That's where you know whether a great writer is a great writer. When you go into this zone and you produce great fiction, or what the reader determines is great fiction, because that's really important. It's not for the writer to think they're great. It's up to the reader. And I think that's what makes a successful writer, getting that balance right between, God, I'm losing my mind a bit today, between what you know and what you don't. Right, I think I've talked too much on this. Right, I'm going to move on now. Just a little bit about Weird and Wonderful. It's not a ghost story like last time, and maybe next week I should have another ghost story. I quite enjoyed my Sheehan ghost story. This is just about, it's wonderful, I think. I've just discovered, you know, Instagram Threads. Not Instagram, everyone knows Instagram. Threads is like Instagrams or Facebooks, if you want to call it that. Twitter or X. I fell out of love with Twitter and X some time ago. I find since Elon Musk bought it, I know there's obviously a lot of problems with like right-wingism and stuff. I get all that, but I actually find it a really difficult platform to access now. It's always asking for logging in, always asking for phone numbers. And we're living the age of phone ID, face ID, and I just think it's really bizarre that any major tech company, Amazon do it, where you're like, we want to authenticate you after putting in the correct password, the correct email address. Now we want to send a code to your phone number. Every time you log into X, you're supposed to do that. Every time you're supposed to log into Amazon, you're supposed to do that for the Kindle books. I think that's mad. Absolutely crazy, and I really don't like it. So I've just got into Threads, and the usability is top notch. What I like about Threads, this is for writing now, of course, I think it's great for the writing community. And I've tried Blue Sky. It's not quite getting across in the right way, to be honest. It's not quite coming across. I find Blue Sky, it's more about, you know, politics stuff, people talking about what Musk did and Trump did. Like, if you really don't like Trump, don't talk about him. Every time you talk about Trump, even to criticize, you advance his cause and his name by one conversation at a time. You don't like them, don't talk about them. That's what drives them crazy. But back to Threads. The best thing about Threads is, because I'm into writing, when I open it up, at the top of the page, it's just about writing, and it's great for getting involved in the community and engaging and trying to build my followers, being honest. That's why I started it. I want to increase followers so that I can post details about this podcast and post details about my blog that I have as well. And you can see the details for that on the page where you download this from. And yeah, starting a discussion. So if you're out there and if you're a writer, if you're a reader, I really recommend Threads at the moment. I'm getting extra ideas even for the podcast and for my blog from that as well. I think that just about covers it today. It's might be the shortest one yet. It's okay, 15 minutes. I think that's enough. Just so you know, there won't be another one for about 10 days, maybe 2 weeks. We've got a holiday coming up, so I'll be going away for a while, just like, a week or something. But as I record these at the weekend, I'm weekend bound. So next weekend, there won't be one. So the next one will be 2 weeks time. But after that, they will resume their weekly course. But thank you everybody for listening. Even if I did have a couple of brain freezes. I'm hoping, by the way, at some point to actually get guests on here. I've got 3 guests, not so much lined up, but like I'm in discussions with them. One will be an in-person interview, a writer artist at my school. And then I've got another 2 in mind. One lives in Turkey. Shout out to Travis. Okay. And I've got another friend that's just started writing, in Shanghai, and their background is art. And I think I'd really like to interview her at some point. So really looking forward to that. Right, guys. Happy podcasting, and please do keep reading and writing. Thank you very much.